Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when a simple cough could send you into a spiral of existential dread, and a broken leg might just be the least of your worries. Imagine yourself, right now, in the bustling, often malodorous streets of a 16th century European city. The air hangs heavy with the scent of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and something vaguely medicinal, probably trying to mask the stench of something far less pleasant. You walk past cramped, timber-framed houses, their upper stories leaning precariously over the narrow cobblestone lanes, threatening to embrace each other in a perpetual dusty hug. Every shadow seems to harbor a new ailment. Every cough from a passerby sends a shiver down your spine. Your immune system, bless its modern heart, would probably stage a full-blown rebellion within hours. Honestly, you probably wouldn't last a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening, drop your current location and local time in the comments. It's always cool to see where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Their remedies were often branded with exotic names, hinting at far-off lands or ancient secrets. Elixir of the Orient, Balm of the Pharaohs, or the Grand Restorative of the Alchemists. These names were designed to evoke mystery, power, and exclusivity, making the common ingredients seem far more potent and valuable. It's the original secret sauce, but for your health, you find yourself navigating a world where the line between healing and harm is blurrier than a fog-laden morning in the Thames. Your body, a vessel of mystery, is constantly under siege, not just from the elements or the occasional rogue cart, but from the very air you breathe, the water you drink, and the food you eat. Medical knowledge, as you understand it, is less a science and more a patchwork quilt of ancient beliefs, folk remedies, and a healthy dose of superstition. If you wake up with a fever, a persistent headache, or a mysterious rash, your first thought isn't to pop an ibuprofen or call your GP. No. Your immediate instinct is a primal fear because you know, deep down, that whatever cure awaits you might be worse than the disease itself. The quack's performance often culminated in the sale of his miracle product. Bottles, vials, or packets of powder would be hawked to the eager crowd, often at inflated prices. You might hand over your hard-earned coins, clutching the precious remedy, convinced that you had just purchased your ticket back to health. The quack, having made his sales, would then pack up his stage and move on to the next town, leaving behind a trail of hope, disappointment, and, occasionally, a few genuinely relieved customers thanks to that handy placebo effect. The doctors of this era are a motley crew, to say the least. You have the university-trained physicians, often adorned in fur-lined robes, who speak in Latin and consult dusty tomes filled with theories passed down from ancient Greece and Rome. They are learned, certainly, but their learning is based on a framework that sees the human body as a delicate balance of four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Any illness, from a common cold to the plague, is simply an imbalance of these vital fluids. Their treatments, therefore, are designed to restore this equilibrium, often through methods that would make your modern stomach churn. The dangers of these quack remedies were significant. Beyond the financial exploitation, many contained harmful substances or simply delayed patients from seeking more appropriate, though still limited care. A quack's cure for a serious infection might mask symptoms temporarily, allowing the disease to progress unchecked, ultimately leading to a worse outcome. The lack of standardized ingredients, dosages, and preparation methods meant that every bottle was a gamble. It's like playing Russian roulette with your liver. Then there are the barber surgeons, a more hands-on and arguably more practical group, eh? They're the ones who will pull your aching tooth, set your broken bone, or, if absolutely necessary, perform a quick amputation. Their shops, often identifiable by a pole striped red and white symbolizing blood and bandages, a charming touch, are places of both necessary relief and profound pain. You might hear the screams of a patient from within, a grim soundtrack to the daily grind of 16th century healthcare. They don't delve into the complexities of humors, They deal with the tangible, the visible, the things they can cut or mend. Despite the obvious risks, the quacks persisted for centuries. Their enduring presence speaks to the fundamental human desire for healing, the power of belief, and the gaps in formal medical knowledge and access. They filled a void, offering a form of accessible, if unreliable, healthcare to the masses. They were the entrepreneurs of illness, the marketers of hope, and a vivid reflection of the medical challenges of their time. And beyond them, you encounter a myriad of healers, the wise women of the village, who brew herbal concoctions and offer whispered incantations, the itinerant peddlers hawking their miracle elixirs from town to town, and the charlatans who prey on desperation with grand promises and even grander claims. It's a free-for-all, a wild west of medicine where anyone with a strong voice and a convincing story can set up shop. There's no licensing board, no medical ethics committee, no peer review. Your health, your very life, often rests on your ability to discern genuine care from outright fraud, a task made infinitely harder by the sheer lack of verifiable information. So, as you drift off to sleep, imagine the vibrant, chaotic scene of the 16th century marketplace, dominated by the booming voice of a quack. He promises you the world in a bottle, a swift end to your suffering, and a return to vitality. You might be skeptical, but in a world where true cures are rare and pain is constant, the allure of a miracle is a powerful force. You might just find yourself reaching for your purse, hoping against hope that this time, this flamboyant stranger holds the key to your recovery. Consider for a moment the common cold. Today, you might grab some tissues, a decongestant, and settle in for a Netflix binge. In the 16th century, a persistent sniffle could be interpreted as an excess of phlegm. The physician might prescribe a purgative to induce vomiting or diarrhea, or perhaps a strong emetic to clear your system. You'd be subjected to uncomfortable, often debilitating, treatments for what is, by modern standards, a minor inconvenience. The cure, in this case, truly feels like a punishment. You've witnessed the theatrical grandiosity of the 16th century quack, understanding how their charisma and the desperation of the populace created fertile ground for their miracle cures. Now, as you drift further into the soothing depths of historical slumber, let's finally shine a light on the most infamous, most enduring symbol of medical charlatanism: snake oil. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a tangible, often oily concoction that promised to cure everything, and in doing so became synonymous with fraudulent remedies. The notion of hygiene, as you know it, is largely absent. Public sanitation is rudimentary at best, non-existent at worst. Waste often flows through open gutters, contributing to the pervasive stench and serving as a breeding ground for disease. Personal hygiene is also a far cry from modern standards. Bathing is infrequent, and clean water is a luxury not always easily accessible. This lack of cleanliness, combined with crowded living conditions, makes the spread of infectious diseases incredibly rapid and devastating. A simple cut can quickly become infected, leading to gangrene and often death. The concept of microscopic organisms causing illness is centuries away from being discovered. Instead, diseases are attributed to bad air miasma, divine punishment, or an imbalance of those pesky humors. Imagine the quack on his stage, having captivated the crowd with his eloquent patter and dazzling displays. The moment arrives for the unveiling of his pièce de résistance, the ultimate panacea, the one true cure for all your earthly woes. He might dramatically pull out a small, corked bottle, perhaps filled with a viscous amber liquid that catches the light. Behold, he might proclaim, the grand elixir of longevity, the sovereign balm of health, distilled from the rarest herbs, imbued with ancient secrets, and yes, containing the potent essence of the mighty serpent. This is it, the moment you've been waiting for. The promise of instant relief in a tiny, expensive bottle. Imagine you're suffering from a persistent cough, one that rattles your chest and leaves you breathless. You consult a physician. He examines your tongue, feels your pulse, and perhaps even takes a sample of your urine, examining its color and clarity with a solemn nod. He determines you have an excess of cold, moist phlegm. His prescription, perhaps a blistering plaster applied to your chest, designed to draw out the offending humor, or a concoction of herbs meant to dry and warm your system. You dutifully follow his instructions, enduring the discomfort, hoping for relief that may or may not come. The term snake oil itself has a fascinating, albeit murky, origin. While the most famous association is with Chinese laborers in the American West using actual snake oil for pain relief, the concept of an all-encompassing, often dubious, animal-based remedy was not new in the 16th century. Various animal fats, organs, and even blood were incorporated into remedies, driven by the belief that the vitality or unique properties of an animal could be transferred to the human body. The serpent, with its shedding skin symbolizing renewal and its often mysterious, sometimes venomous nature, held a particular mystique. It was seen as both a creature of healing and of danger, making its essence a potent ingredient for a miracle cure. One common historical fact that often surprises people is the widespread belief in the power of astrology in medical diagnosis and treatment. Physicians would consult astrological charts to determine the most auspicious time for a bloodletting or the most effective herbs to gather. The alignment of planets was believed to influence the balance of humors within the body, making the cosmos an integral part of your medical journey. So, your doctor wasn't just checking your pulse, he was also checking the stars. The allure of snake oil, or its 16th century equivalents, lay in its promise of universality. In a world where specific diseases were poorly understood, and treatments often targeted symptoms or humors rather than root causes. The idea of a single remedy that could address all ailments was incredibly appealing. Why suffer through multiple purges and foul-tasting herbal brews when one simple elixir could fix everything? It was the ultimate shortcut to health, a magical solution in a time of profound medical complexity. This simplicity, combined with the quack's persuasive rhetoric, made it irresistible to a desperate populace, a particularly obscure detail that highlights the desperation and strange remedies of the time involves the use of moss scraped from the skull of a dead man. This moss of a dead man's skull was believed to have potent medicinal properties, particularly for conditions like epilepsy or nosebleeds. It was powdered and mixed with various liquids, then administered to the patient. The sheer macabre nature of this remedy underscores the lengths people would go to in search of a cure, and the lack of scientific understanding that allowed such practices to flourish. It's a stark reminder that when you don't know why something works, you'll try almost anything that someone claims does. One common historical fact is that while the term snake oil became prominent later, the concept of a universal remedy, or panacea, was very much alive in the 16th century. These were often marketed as secret formulas, passed down through generations, or discovered in exotic lands. They were designed to appeal to the deep-seated human desire for a quick fix, a magical solution to the complex problem of illness. The quack understood this fundamental need and capitalized on it with their grand claims and theatrical presentations. The academic debate surrounding the actual effectiveness of some 16th century herbal remedies still lingers. While many treatments were based on flawed humoral theory, some herbs did possess genuine medicinal properties that were observed through trial and error over centuries. For instance, willow bark, which contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin, was used for pain and fever, though its mechanism of action wasn't understood. Historians still debate whether the occasional success of these remedies was due to their inherent properties, the placebo effect, or simply the body's natural healing capabilities overcoming the illness despite the intervention. It's a fascinating question how much of the cure was the medicine, and how much was simply time and luck. The actual ingredients of these 16th century snake oils were rarely, if ever, derived from snakes. They were typically concoctions of common, inexpensive substances. These might include various plant extracts, often those with mild laxative, diuretic, or sedative properties, which could produce noticeable, albeit temporary, effects. Alcohol was a frequent component, providing a pleasant warmth, temporary dulling of pain, and a sense of well-being, which could easily be mistaken for genuine healing. Sometimes they contained genuinely harmful ingredients, like mercury or lead, which, while toxic, might have produced dramatic and dangerous physiological reactions that were misinterpreted as a powerful cleansing. It's like trying to fix a broken clock by hitting it with a hammer. Sometimes it might tick for a second, but it's still fundamentally broken. The concept of a hospital, as you know it, is also vastly different. While there were institutions that cared for the sick, they were often more akin to hospices or charitable houses for the poor and infirm. Rather than places for active medical treatment and recovery, the wealthy would be treated in their homes, attended by physicians and apothecaries. For the common person, falling ill often meant relying on family, local healers, or, if truly desperate, the rudimentary care offered by religious orders. The idea of sterile environments, isolation of infectious patients, or even basic sanitation within these institutions was largely unheard of. A trip to such a place might increase your chances of contracting another illness, rather than curing the one you had. An obscure detail about the marketing of these universal remedies is the emphasis on their secret or ancient origins. Quacks would often claim their formulas were derived from long-lost alchemical texts, or from the wisdom of distant, mystical cultures. This added an aura of exclusivity and profound knowledge, making the remedies seem more potent and trustworthy than the common herbal brews available from the local apothecary. It played into the human fascination with hidden knowledge and the exotic, making the mundane seem magical. It's like buying a secret family recipe for a cookie that turns out to be just flour and sugar. Imagine the fear that permeates daily life. Every ache, every pain, every unusual symptom is magnified by the knowledge that effective treatment is scarce, and understanding of disease is rudimentary. You live in a constant state of low-level anxiety about your health, knowing that a simple infection could swiftly turn fatal. There's no safety net, no antibiotics, no advanced surgical techniques. Your body is a fragile thing, constantly at the mercy of unseen forces and the often misguided interventions of those who claim to heal. The academic debate surrounding the widespread acceptance of these universal remedies often delves into the socio-economic conditions of the time. Historians still debate whether the popularity of snake oil and similar panaceas was primarily a symptom of widespread poverty and limited access to formal medical care, forcing people to rely on cheaper, albeit dubious, alternatives. Or was it more a reflection of the profound psychological need for hope and control in an era where disease was rampant and scientific understanding was primitive? It's a complex interplay of desperation, belief, and the fundamental human desire for a cure. And then there's the pain. Oh, but the pain. Without anesthetics, any surgical procedure, no matter how minor, is an agonizing ordeal. Setting a broken bone, extracting a tooth, or lancing a boil, these are all moments of intense suffering. You learn to brace yourself, to bite down on a piece of leather, and to pray for a swift end to the agony. The stoicism required to endure such medical interventions is immense, a testament to the sheer resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming discomfort. The appeal of snake oil wasn't just about its supposed ingredients, it was about the story behind it. The quack would weave elaborate tales of its discovery, its miraculous effects, and the countless individuals it had supposedly saved. He might even stage a dramatic demonstration, perhaps having an accomplice feign a sudden, debilitating cramp, only to miraculously recover after a few drops of the elixir. These performances were crucial in building trust and convincing the audience of the remedy's efficacy. You weren't just buying a bottle, you were buying into a narrative of healing and hope. The lack of understanding about anatomy and physiology is also a major hurdle. While some dissections were performed, particularly in university settings, the knowledge gained was often filtered through the lens of ancient texts, rather than direct observation. The intricate workings of the internal organs, the circulatory system, the nervous system, these are largely mysteries. This limited understanding means that many treatments are based on guesswork and tradition, rather than a true comprehension of how the body functions. It's like trying to fix a complex machine when you only have a vague idea of what half the parts do. Consider the sheer psychological power of belief. If you are suffering from chronic pain, a persistent cough, or a debilitating illness, and someone offers you a simple, confident solution, your mind is often eager to believe. The placebo effect is a powerful force, and in the absence of genuine medical understanding, the belief that a remedy is working can sometimes trigger the body's own healing mechanisms, leading to temporary relief of symptoms. This temporary relief, however fleeting, was enough to perpetuate the myth of snake oil's effectiveness and encourage repeat purchases. It's like convincing yourself that a broken leg feels better after you put a magic sticker on it. So, as you walk through this 16th century world, you realize that your health is a precious, precarious thing. You learn to be wary, to be skeptical, but also to be desperate. Because when illness strikes, and it inevitably will, you'll be faced with choices that, from your modern perspective, seem utterly insane. And yet, in that moment of vulnerability, you might just find yourself reaching for anything, no matter how outlandish, that promises relief. This is the world that sets the stage for the rise of the snake oil salesman, a world ripe for exploitation, where hope often triumphs over reason. You are a patient in an age of profound medical darkness, and your survival is often a matter of sheer luck rather than scientific intervention. The widespread application of snake oil meant it was prescribed for virtually everything, from headaches and toothaches to fevers, digestive issues, skin ailments, and even more serious conditions like consumption or gout. The quack would simply adjust his sales pitch to fit the ailment of the moment, always emphasizing the remedy's universal healing properties. It was the ultimate one-size-fits-all medical solution, a testament to its fraudulent versatility. You've just gotten a glimpse into the bewildering medical landscape of the 16th century, a world where your modern notions of health and healing are utterly irrelevant. Now, let's delve deeper into the very bedrock of their medical philosophy, the grand theory that dictated every diagnosis and every desperate treatment, the concept of the four humors. Imagine, and if you will, that your body isn't a complex network of organs, cells, and systems, but rather a delicate, constantly shifting balance of four primary fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile or choler, and black bile or melancholy. This isn't just some quaint folk belief. This is the absolute, unquestioned truth taught in universities, preached by physicians, and understood, to varying degrees, by every person you meet. The dangers of relying on snake oil were manifold. Firstly, it often contained inert ingredients, meaning it did absolutely nothing to treat the underlying condition. This could lead to a delay in seeking genuine, albeit limited, medical attention, allowing serious illnesses to progress unchecked. Secondly, as mentioned, some remedies contained genuinely toxic substances that could cause severe harm or even death. You might be trading one illness for another, or simply accelerating your demise. Thirdly, the financial exploitation was significant, as desperate individuals would spend their meager savings on these expensive, ineffective concoctions. This humoral theory, tracing its roots back to ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates and later refined by Galen, is the lens through which every ailment is viewed. It's elegant in its simplicity, yet utterly flawed in its application. Each humor is associated with specific qualities. Blood is hot and moist. Phlegm is cold and moist. Yellow bile is hot and dry, and black bile is cold and dry. Think of it like a cosmic elemental chart for your insides. You're not just a person, you're a walking, talking, sometimes sneezing, sometimes feverish blend of these four essences. The very act of purchasing and consuming snake oil was a ritual of hope. You would carefully administer the drops, perhaps at specific times of day, or with certain incantations, believing that each dose was bringing you closer to recovery. This ritual, combined with the quack's promises, created a powerful psychological effect, offering comfort and a sense of control in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. Your personal disposition, your temperament, even your personality, are believed to be determined by the dominant humor within you. If you're sanguine, you're cheerful and optimistic, brimming with blood. If you're phlegmatic, you're calm and stoic, characterized by an abundance of phlegm. Choleric types are passionate and irritable, fueled by yellow bile, and melancholics. Well, they're prone to sadness and introspection, weighed down by black bile. So, if you're feeling a bit down, it's not a bad day. It's just your black bile acting up. Makes sense, right? No, not really. But back then, it was the ultimate explanation for everything from your mood swings to your chronic cough. The enduring legacy of snake oil as a term for fraudulent remedies speaks volumes about its impact. It became a byword for deception, a symbol of the dangers of unchecked medical claims. Even today, when someone refers to something as snake oil, you immediately understand that it's a scam, a false promise, a remedy that offers nothing but hot air and empty hopes. This linguistic survival is a testament to the pervasive nature of these quack cures in historical consciousness. The quacks also exploited the fear of the unknown. Diseases like the plague, smallpox, and consumption were devastating. Their cause is a complete mystery. In such an environment, any explanation, no matter how outlandish, and any promised cure, no matter how dubious, could gain traction. The quack offered a narrative, a story of control over chaos, which was deeply comforting in a world where death could strike suddenly and without warning. It's like being lost in a dark forest, and someone offers you a flashlight, even if it's just a toy. The quacks who peddled snake oil were often master psychologists, even if they didn't understand the term. They understood human vulnerability, the power of suggestion, and the desperate need for solutions. They exploited the gaps in knowledge, the fear of death, and the universal desire for health. Their success wasn't due to the efficacy of their remedies, but to their ability to tap into the deepest anxieties and hopes of their audience. When you fall ill, the physician doesn't look for a germ or a virus. They look for an imbalance, your fever, too much hot blood, your persistent cough with copious mucus and excessive cold, moist phlegm, your sudden outburst of anger, a surge of hot, dry, yellow bile, and that lingering sadness that just won't lift. Clearly an overabundance of cold, dry, black bile. The entire diagnostic process revolves around identifying which humor is out of whack, and then devising a way to bring it back into line. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by adjusting the brightness of the light bulb. So, as you finally succumb to sleep, imagine the 16th century marketplace, the quack's booming voice echoing in your ears, and the small, mysterious bottle of snake oil clutched in your hand. It promises everything, cures all, and offers a glimmer of hope in a world shrouded in medical uncertainty. You might be skeptical, but in that moment of desperation, the allure of a universal remedy, however dubious, is a powerful force, a testament to the enduring human quest for healing, even when the path is paved with deception. This theory permeates every aspect of life. Food, for instance, isn't just sustenance, it has humoral properties. You wouldn't want to eat too many cold foods if you were already suffering from an excess of phlegm. Would you in certain activities? Climates, and even times of day are believed to influence the humors. It's a holistic, albeit misguided approach to health that sees the individual as intimately connected to their environment and the cosmos. You are a microcosm, reflecting the macrocosm, and your humors are the bridge. You've just seen how the quack, with his theatrical flair and bottles of snake oil, capitalized on the desperation of the 16th century. But now, as you settle even deeper into your historical slumber, let's explore a more fundamental question. Why did people, faced with such dubious remedies and often painful treatments, readily embrace them? Why did belief so often triumph over what, to our modern minds, seems like obvious charlatanism or outright danger? This is where we delve into the fascinating and often heartbreaking psychology of belief in an era of profound medical uncertainty. Let's imagine you wake up one morning feeling absolutely dreadful. Your head is pounding, your throat is scratchy, and you have a persistent cough. You feel hot and flushed. Your physician, after a solemn examination, declares that you have an excess of blood. This is a common historical fact, and blood was often seen as the culprit in many acute illnesses due to its association with heat and vitality. The solution, therefore, is to remove some of that excess blood. This leads us to the most iconic, and perhaps terrifying, treatment of the era bloodletting. Imagine yourself, once again, in that tumultuous 16th century world. Life is precarious. Disease is rampant, striking swiftly and often without warning. A simple infection can lead to agonizing death. There are no antibiotics, no advanced surgical techniques, no sophisticated diagnostic tools. When you fall ill, you are acutely aware of your vulnerability, your body a fragile vessel against unseen forces. This pervasive fear, this constant awareness of mortality, creates a fertile ground for hope, no matter how outlandish its guise. When you're drowning, you'll grasp at any straw, even if it's just a piece of seaweed. You might be led to a barber surgeon, or the physician himself might perform the procedure. A vein, often in your arm, is opened, and a certain amount of blood is allowed to drain into a bowl. The idea is to literally drain away the bad or excess humor, thereby restoring balance. It's a bit like trying to deflate a balloon by poking a hole in it, hoping it doesn't just burst. Sometimes leeches are applied. Slimy little creatures that attach themselves to your skin and gorge themselves on your blood. A slightly less dramatic but equally unsettling method of humoral rebalancing. You might feel weaker, certainly, but the prevailing belief is that you are getting better, that the offending humor is being expelled. And hey, if you faint during the process, that's just proof it's working. Right? Just a little joke to lighten the mood. The first, and perhaps most powerful psychological driver is the sheer lack of alternatives. What do you do when your child is burning with fever, or your loved one is racked with a debilitating cough, and the university-trained physician offers only painful purges or bloodletting that often seems to weaken them further? The quack, with his confident smile and glowing testimonials, offers a different path, a promise of swift and painless recovery. Even if it seems too good to be true, the absence of genuinely effective, understandable treatments makes any alternative, no matter how dubious, incredibly appealing. It's like being offered a blurry map when you're utterly lost. Even if it's wrong, it's better than no map at all. If your ailment is deemed to be an excess of phlegm, perhaps a persistent cough or a runny nose, the treatment might involve purging. This could mean strong emetics to induce vomiting, or powerful laxatives to encourage bowel movements. The goal is to expel the cold, moist humor from your system. You might spend a day or two in extreme discomfort, convinced that the violent expulsions are a sign of your body cleansing itself. It's a rather aggressive spring cleaning for your insides. Then there's the power of the placebo effect, a phenomenon that was, of course, entirely unknown in the 16th century, but was undoubtedly a major player in the perceived success of many remedies. If you truly believe that a certain elixir, a particular ritual, or a specific incantation will make you better, your mind can, in subtle ways, influence your body. Pain might lessen, symptoms might temporarily abate, and your overall sense of well-being might improve. This isn't magic, it's the complex interplay between mind and body. For a desperate patient, this temporary relief, however short-lived, was undeniable proof that the remedy worked. "I felt better after taking it," they would exclaim, reinforcing their belief in the quack's reputation. For an excess of yellow bile, associated with fever, anger, and inflammation, the physician might prescribe cooling and drying remedies. These could include certain herbs, or perhaps a diet designed to reduce the heat in your system. You might be advised to avoid spicy foods or strenuous activity, all in the name of calming that fiery humor. It's like trying to put out a bonfire with a damp cloth, but with your internal organs. Another crucial factor is the authority of the healer. In a hierarchical society, figures of authority, whether they were university-trained physicians or charismatic quacks, commanded respect and trust. The physician, with his Latin phrases and ancient texts, embodied learned knowledge. The quack, with his grand pronouncements and theatrical displays, embodied confidence and a seemingly unique insight. When someone speaks with such conviction, especially about something as vital as your health, it's incredibly difficult to question them, particularly if you lack the education or scientific framework to do so. It's like trusting your GPS even when it tells you to turn left into a lake. And then there's black bile, the humor of melancholy. If you're suffering from prolonged sadness, lethargy, or what we might now call depression, it's attributed to an excess of this cold, dry humor. Treatments might involve warming and moistening remedies, gentle purgatives, or even changes in diet and lifestyle to encourage a more balanced disposition. Sometimes more extreme measures are taken, like trepanation drilling a hole in the skull, to release the bad air or humors. Though this was less common for simple melancholy. It's a bit like trying to cheer someone up by giving them a hot bath and a good book. But with a medieval twist. One common historical fact that highlights this psychological aspect is the role of anecdotal evidence. People relied heavily on personal stories and testimonials. If your neighbor, waiting who was suffering from a persistent cough, claimed to have been cured by a certain peddler's elixir, you were far more likely to try it yourself. These word-of-mouth endorsements, often exaggerated or misinterpreted, formed a powerful social proof, creating a ripple effect of belief throughout communities. There was no scientific method, No double-blind studies. Just my aunt's cousin's friend said it worked. An obscure detail that underscores the depth of humoral belief is the practice of uroscopy. Physicians would meticulously examine a patient's urine, not just for color and clarity, but for sediment, smell, and even taste. They believed that the urine provided a direct window into the balance of the humors within the body. Different shades, textures, and even the presence of certain threads or clouds in the urine would indicate specific humoral imbalances. It was a primary diagnostic tool, often more relied upon than a physical examination. Imagine your doctor today asking to taste your urine sample. Yeah, no thanks. The human brain is also wired to seek patterns and explanations, even when none truly exist. When a person takes a remedy and then, by coincidence or the body's natural healing process, recovers, the brain immediately connects the two events. The remedy caused the recovery. This cognitive bias, known as confirmation bias, meant that any perceived success was attributed to the treatment, while failures were often dismissed as the patient being too far gone, the remedy not being taken correctly, or simply divine will. It's like thinking your lucky socks won the lottery, even though you wear them every day. The academic debate surrounding humoral theory often centers on its persistence, despite its obvious scientific shortcomings. Historians still debate whether its longevity was primarily due to the lack of alternative, more accurate models, the authority of ancient texts, or its inherent flexibility, allowing it to explain almost any symptom. Was it simply the best they had, or was there a deeper psychological comfort in having a comprehensive, albeit incorrect, framework for understanding illness? It's a fascinating chicken or egg question. Did the theory persist because it was believed, or was it believed because it persisted? An obscure detail that played into the psychology of belief was the sheer unpleasantness of many legitimate 16th century treatments. Bloodletting was painful and weakening. Purges were debilitating. Blistering agents caused agony. In contrast, a sweet-tasting elixir, perhaps laced with alcohol or opium, offered a more palatable, even comforting, experience. The relative ease of consumption, coupled with any temporary symptomatic relief, made these snake oils far more appealing than the gruesome alternatives. Sometimes, people chose the pleasant lie over the painful truth. This humoral framework also influenced the timing of treatments. Physicians would consult astrological charts, as we touched upon, but also the time of day, the season, and even the phase of the moon to determine the most propitious moment for intervention. Bloodletting might be more effective at certain times, or specific herbs might be more potent when gathered under a particular lunar phase. It adds another layer of complexity, and frankly, a lot more guesswork, to an already uncertain process. The academic debate surrounding the placebo effect in historical medicine is complex. Historians still debate the extent to which the placebo effect genuinely contributed to perceived healing in an era of ineffective treatments. Was it merely psychological comfort, or did it trigger physiological responses that genuinely aided recovery in some cases? And how much of the success of these remedies was due to the body's natural ability to overcome illness, rather than any active ingredient or psychological influence? It's a fascinating area of study, trying to untangle the threads of belief, biology, and historical circumstance. You, as the patient, are not just passively receiving these treatments. You are an active participant in this humoral dance. You're expected to adjust your diet, your lifestyle, and even your emotional state to maintain this delicate balance. If you're prone to anger, you might be advised to avoid certain foods or to engage in calming activities. If you're naturally melancholic, you might be encouraged to seek out company and engage in cheerful pursuits. It's a constant self-monitoring, a perpetual attempt to keep your internal scales perfectly level. The ritualistic aspect of taking medicine also played a significant psychological role. The act of preparing a brew, administering drops from a bottle, or applying a poultice, often at specific times or with certain accompanying prayers, provided a sense of control and agency. In a world where illness felt random and overwhelming, these rituals offered a structured response, a feeling that you were actively doing something to combat the disease. This ritualistic engagement could reduce anxiety and foster a hopeful mindset, which in itself can be beneficial for recovery. It's like having a comfort blanket, but for your insides, The sheer volume of remedies designed to manipulate these humors is staggering. There are purgatives, emetics, diuretics, sudorifics to induce sweating, and countless herbal concoctions aimed at warming, cooling, drying, or moistening the body. Every plant, every mineral, every animal product is analyzed for its humoral properties. Bear's grease might be used to warm, while rose water might be used to cool. It's a vast, intricate system of correspondences, where everything in the natural world has a specific role to play in the humoral drama of your body. Furthermore, the 16th century was a deeply religious era. Illness was often interpreted as divine punishment or a test of faith. This spiritual dimension intertwined with medical belief, meaning that recovery could be attributed to God's grace, often mediated through the miraculous properties of a remedy or the prayers accompanying its administration. The quack might even invoke divine blessings in his sales pitch, further tapping into the spiritual hopes of his audience. It's a powerful combination medical promise wrapped in spiritual reassurance. Even the environment you live in is considered through a humoral lens. A damp, cold climate might be thought to encourage an excess of phlegm, while a hot, dry climate could lead to an imbalance of yellow bile. If you could afford it, you might even move to a different region for your health, seeking a climate that better suited your humoral constitution. It's like choosing your vacation destination based on whether it'll make your blood more sanguine or less melancholic. The social pressure to conform also played a part. If everyone in your village was trying a particular remedy, or if a respected elder swore by a certain healer, it would be difficult to resist. The desire to belong, to follow the crowd, and to not be seen as a skeptic in a time of shared suffering could lead individuals to embrace remedies they might otherwise question. It's the original peer pressure, but with your health on the line, the physician, armed with this ancient wisdom, is a figure of immense authority. They are not just healers, they are interpreters of the body's internal language, deciphering the subtle signs of humoral discord. Their pronouncements are rarely questioned. For what alternative is there? The scientific method, controlled experiments, and germ theory are distant dreams. You place your trust and your life in their hands, hoping that their understanding of these invisible fluids is accurate enough to save you. Finally, there was the sheer desperation. When faced with the imminent threat of death or prolonged agonizing suffering, reason can often take a backseat to hope. People were willing to try anything, no matter how improbable, if it offered even a glimmer of a chance for survival or relief. This vulnerability was the quack's greatest asset, allowing them to sell their wares to an audience that was, quite literally, fighting for their lives. You might scoff at the idea of snake oil now, but imagine being in their shoes with no other options. This unwavering belief in humors also explains why treatments often seemed so counterintuitive to modern eyes. If you have a fever, which we now know is the body's way of fighting infection, the 16th century physician sees it as an excess of heat. Their solution to cool you down, often through bloodletting or cooling poultices, which might actually hinder your body's natural defenses. It's a classic example of treating the symptom rather than the cause, but with a theoretical framework that made it seem perfectly logical at the time. So, as you finally drift into the deepest parts of your sleep, reflect on the complex tapestry of human psychology that allowed unproven remedies to flourish in the 16th century. It wasn't just ignorance, it was fear, hope, the power of belief, the absence of alternatives, and the persuasive charm of those who promised miracles. You are fortunate to live in an age where scientific understanding, though still evolving, provides a far more reliable path to healing. So, as you drift off, imagine the constant vigilance required to maintain your humoral balance in the 16th century. Every meal, every activity, every change in weather is a potential disruptor. And when illness inevitably strikes, you are not just fighting a disease, you are fighting an imbalance, a disharmony within your very essence. Guided by a medical philosophy that, for all its intricate detail, was ultimately a magnificent, elaborate misunderstanding of the human body. You've just explored the intricate psychological landscape that led people in the 16th century to embrace remedies that, to our modern eyes, seem dubious or even dangerous. Now, as you drift further into the embrace of historical slumber, let's confront the ultimate test of their medical beliefs, the terrifying specter of widespread disease. Imagine a world where every cough could be the harbinger of doom, every fever a potential death sentence. and the very air you breathe seemed to carry the seeds of sickness. This is the era of plague, pestilence, and the desperate search for any panacea, no matter how outlandish. You've just navigated the intricate and, frankly, bewildering world of humoral theory, understanding how your 16th century body is perceived as a delicate balance of 4 vital fluids. Now, let's move from theory to practice and prepare yourself. Because the treatments designed to restore this balance are, by modern standards, often more terrifying than the ailments themselves. We're talking about practices that would make your skin crawl, your stomach churn, and your inner hypochondriac scream for the safety of a modern pharmacy. Welcome to the era of bloodletting and beyond, where the cure often involved a significant loss of something precious. You are living in a time when infectious diseases are not just common, they are a constant, looming threat. There's no understanding of bacteria or viruses, no concept of contagion in the way we know it. Instead, illnesses are attributed to miasma, bad air, or an imbalance of humors, or even divine wrath. When a devastating epidemic sweeps through your town, the fear is palpable, a cold dread that settles deep in your bones. You see your neighbors, your friends, your family members succumb with horrifying speed, their bodies racked with fever, their skin covered in gruesome sores. In such a terrifying environment, the search for a cure, any cure, becomes a desperate, all-consuming quest. Imagine you're suffering from a persistent cough, a fever, or perhaps a throbbing headache. The physician, having meticulously diagnosed an excess of blood, that hot, moist humor, prescribes the most common and widely accepted remedy, bloodletting. This isn't some fringe practice, it's the cornerstone of 16th century medicine, performed by everyone from learned physicians to the local barber surgeon. You might find yourself in a dimly lit room, the air thick with anticipation. As the tools of the trade are laid out, a sharp lancet, a bowl to collect the vital fluid, and perhaps some bandages. The barber surgeon, with his apron stained from previous procedures, approaches with a practiced, almost casual air. The most infamous of these scourges, of course, is the plague. Imagine the sheer terror when the telltale signs appear swollen. Painful lymph nodes, buboes in the groin, armpit, or neck, followed by fever, chills, and often a swift, agonizing death. When the plague arrives, life grinds to a halt. Shops close, streets empty, and those who can afford it flee to the countryside, hoping to escape the invisible killer. You might see carts rumbling through the streets, piled high with bodies, a grim reminder of the disease's relentless march. In this atmosphere of utter despair, reason often gives way to superstition, and the most outlandish remedies gain traction. He might tie a ligature around your arm to make the veins swell. Then, with a quick, decisive motion, he makes an incision into a prominent vein, often in the crook of your elbow. You feel a sharp prick. Then the warm, sticky sensation of your own blood beginning to flow into the waiting bowl. The goal isn't to drain you completely, but to remove a specific amount, perhaps a few ounces, or even a pint, depending on the severity of your condition and the physician's judgment. You watch, perhaps with a morbid fascination, as your life force ebbs away, hoping that with each drop, the illness is leaving your body too. It's a bit like trying to fix a leaky roof by letting more water in, just to see if it balances out. What could possibly go wrong? The belief is that by removing the excess blood, the body's humoral balance will be restored, and the fever will subside, the headache will ease, and the cough will vanish. Sometimes, you might feel a temporary relief, perhaps due to the placebo effect, or simply the body's natural healing process taking over. Other times, you might feel weaker, dizzy, or even faint. This fainting, ironically, is often seen as a sign that the treatment is working, that the body is reacting positively to the purging of the offending humor. Ah, a good faint. The humors are rebalancing. Your physician might exclaim, as you slowly come to, bloodletting wasn't limited to venesection cutting a vein. Another popular method involved the use of leeches. These slimy, segmented creatures, often kept in jars, are applied to the skin over the affected area. They attach themselves with suckers and proceed to engorge themselves on your blood. Dropping off when full? It's a less dramatic, but perhaps more unsettling experience. You feel the gentle tugging, the slight prick, and then the slow, continuous drain. Imagine a dozen tiny living straws attached to your arm, slowly sipping away your ailments. It's a truly unique spa treatment, if you're into that sort of thing. One common historical fact is the widespread use of plague doctors during outbreaks. These figures, often not formally trained physicians, would don distinctive protective gear, a heavy waxed coat, gloves, and most famously, a bird-like mask with a long beak filled with aromatic herbs, spices, and sometimes even sponges soaked in vinegar. The beak was meant to filter the bad air miasma and protect the wearer from the stench of death and decay. While their attire was certainly striking, their presence offered a grim sense of official response. Their treatments were largely ineffective, relying on the same humoral theories or unproven remedies. It's like trying to stop a flood with a colander, but with a really cool outfit. Beyond bloodletting, there were other equally aggressive methods of purging the body. If an excess of phlegm was suspected, perhaps from a persistent cough with a lot of mucus, the physician might prescribe powerful emetics, substances designed to induce violent vomiting. You would drink a foul-tasting concoction, and then spend a miserable hour or two retching, convinced that every heave was expelling the cold, moist humor from your chest. It's a truly unpleasant experience, leaving you weak and exhausted, but the theory dictates that it's for your own good. In the face of such overwhelming mortality, people became incredibly susceptible to promises of a miracle cure. The quack's universal panacea, his grand elixir of longevity, or his sovereign balm of health, which seemed like a dubious proposition for a common cold, suddenly became a beacon of desperate hope against the plague. For a few coins, you could buy a bottle that promised immunity, or at least a chance of survival, when all other options had failed. The psychological need for control, or something to cling to in the face of uncontrollable death, was immense. Similarly, strong purgatives or laxatives were used to induce profuse diarrhea, believed to expel excess humors, particularly black bile or yellow bile, through the bowels. You would be confined to your bed, or perhaps a chamber pot, for hours, enduring cramps and discomfort, all in the name of internal cleansing. The sheer volume of bodily fluids being expelled from you, whether through blood, vomit, or stool, is a testament to the era's belief in radical purification. It's like trying to clean a house by blasting it with a fire hose, hoping to wash away all the dirt, even if it takes out a few walls in the process. An obscure detail that highlights the extreme measures taken during plague outbreaks is the use of theriac. This was an incredibly complex, multi-ingredient concoction, often containing dozens, sometimes hundreds, of ingredients, including opium, viper's flesh, and various exotic spices. It was believed to be a powerful antidote against poisons and a universal remedy for all ills, particularly the plague. The preparation of theriac was a lengthy, ritualistic process, often performed publicly by apothecaries, adding to its mystique and perceived potency. It was seen as the ultimate weapon against the Black Death, a kind of medieval super medicine. Even though its efficacy was largely unproven, it's like trying to build a supercomputer out of every spare part you can find, hoping it just works. Another common historical fact is the use of blistering agents. If you had a localized pain, inflammation, or an internal ailment, a plaster containing irritating substances, often cantharides or Spanish fly, would be applied to your skin. This would cause a large, painful blister to form, which was then lanced. The fluid that drained from the blister was believed to be the bad humor being drawn out of your body. It's a rather direct and incredibly painful way to remove what they thought was the source of the problem. You'd be left with a raw, weeping wound, but the physician would assure you that the poison had been expelled. The academic debate surrounding the impact of these devastating outbreaks on medical progress is profound. Historians still debate whether the repeated failures of traditional humoral medicine during plague epidemics ultimately contributed to its decline, forcing a slow, painful reevaluation of medical understanding. Or did the sheer scale of the disaster simply reinforce existing superstitions and desperation, making people even more reliant on any promised panacea? However false it's a complex question of cause and effect, did the plague break the old medical paradigms, or simply entrench them deeper in fear? An obscure detail that highlights the extreme nature of these purges is the use of clysters, or enemas, often administered with a large syringe or bladder. These weren't just for constipation. They were a common method to introduce various concoctions directly into the lower bowel, believed to cleanse the system and expel humors. Some clysters contained strong purgatives, while others might include soothing herbs. The sheer invasiveness of these treatments, often performed by lay practitioners or even family members, underscores the lack of privacy and the very different attitudes towards the body in the 16th century. It's a truly humbling experience, to say the least. Beyond the plague, other pestilences regularly swept through communities. Smallpox, with its disfiguring pustules and high mortality rate, was a constant threat. Typhus, dysentery, and various fevers could decimate populations. Each outbreak brought with it renewed panic and a heightened demand for any remedy that offered even a sliver of hope. The quacks, with their portable stages and ready supply of cures, were perfectly positioned to capitalize on this perpetual state of medical emergency. The academic debate surrounding these aggressive purging methods often centers on their actual impact on patient health. Historians still debate whether these practices, particularly repeated bloodletting, caused more harm than good, weakening already ill patients and making them more susceptible to complications or death. While some might have experienced temporary relief perhaps from a reduction in blood pressure during a fever, the long-term effects of significant blood loss or extreme dehydration from purges were undoubtedly detrimental. Was it a necessary evil in the absence of better knowledge, or a testament to the dangers of dogma over empirical observation? It's a question that keeps medical historians up at night. Unlike you, who should be drifting off? You might see individuals desperately trying folk remedies, passed down through generations, or turning to religious rituals, prayers, and penitence, believing that the illness was divine punishment. The line between medicine, magic, and religion blurred even further during these times of crisis. People would wear amulets, carry charms, or even engage in self-flagellation, all in the hope of appeasing God or warding off the unseen forces of disease. It's a testament to the human spirit's capacity for hope, even in the face of overwhelming despair. Beyond the direct removal of fluids, other practices aimed at rebalancing humors included sweating and cupping. To induce sweating, you might be wrapped in heavy blankets, given hot drinks, or even placed in a heated room. The idea was to expel excess humors through perspiration. Cupping involved heating small glass cups to create a vacuum, then placing them on the skin. As the cup cooled, it would pull the skin and underlying tissue upwards, drawing blood to the surface. Sometimes, the skin would be lightly cut before cupping wet cupping to allow some blood to be drawn out. Combining the principles of bloodletting with localized suction. It's like giving your skin a giant hickey, all for your health. The very concept of a panacea, a cure-all, gained immense traction during these times. When you don't know the specific cause of a disease or how to treat it effectively, the idea of a single remedy that works for everything is incredibly comforting. It simplifies a terrifyingly complex problem into a manageable solution, even if that solution is entirely illusory. The quack's genius lay in understanding this psychological need for simplicity and offering it in a bottle. The pain management during these procedures was, to put it mildly, non-existent. You would be expected to endure the discomfort, the pain, and the sheer unpleasantness with stoicism. There were no anesthetics, no painkillers beyond perhaps a strong alcoholic drink to dull the senses. Your screams might be muffled by a cloth, or simply ignored as a necessary part of the healing process. The resilience of people in the 16th century, enduring such brutal medical interventions, is truly astonishing. It makes a trip to the dentist today feel like a luxury spa day. The economic impact of these outbreaks was also significant, further driving people towards cheaper, more accessible options. When trade routes were disrupted and daily life ground to a halt, people's livelihoods were destroyed. The expensive services of a university-trained physician became even more out of reach, pushing more and more desperate individuals into the arms of the itinerant quack, whose miracle cure might be all they could afford. The psychological impact of these treatments must have been immense. Constantly being subjected to invasive, painful, and often debilitating procedures would have fostered a deep-seated fear of illness, but also a desperate hope that these drastic measures would ultimately bring relief. You would likely develop a fatalistic attitude towards your body, seeing it as a battleground for unseen forces, constantly needing to be purged and rebalanced. Every ache and pain would be a reminder of the constant struggle to maintain humoral equilibrium. The fear of contagion, though misunderstood, also played a role. While they didn't know about germs, people observed that illnesses spread from person to person. This led to rudimentary quarantine measures, but also to a heightened sense of paranoia. The quack, by offering a protective elixir, tapped into this fear, promising a shield against the invisible enemy. You might buy a bottle not just to cure an existing illness, but to prevent one from ever taking hold. It's like buying a magic force field for your body. The lack of understanding about infection meant that these procedures were often performed in unsanitary conditions, using unsterilized instruments. A simple bloodletting could easily introduce bacteria into the bloodstream, leading to secondary infections, sepsis, and ultimately, death. The very act of trying to cure an illness could, and often did, introduce a new, more dangerous one. It's a grim irony that the tools of healing were often also the agents of demise. So, as you finally drift off into the deepest parts of your sleep, imagine the pervasive fear of the 16th century, a world constantly under siege from unseen diseases. The plague, smallpox, and countless fevers stalked the land, leaving a trail of death and despair. In this terrifying landscape, traditional medicine often faltered, creating a desperate hunger for any solution. And into this void stepped the quack, with his promises of panaceas, his bottles of snake oil offering a glimmer of hope, however false, to a populace literally fighting for their lives. It was a time when the human need for survival and the powerful allure of a miracle could override all reason. Even the diet was considered a form of purging or rebalancing. Certain foods were believed to be hot or cold, wet or dry, and your diet would be meticulously controlled to either enhance or diminish specific humors. If you had too much hot blood, you might be put on a diet of cooling foods. If you were suffering from an excess of cold phlegm, you might be prescribed warming spices and dishes. It's a culinary dance designed to keep your internal fluids in perfect harmony, which meant saying goodbye to your favorite spicy curry if you were feeling a bit choleric. You've just journeyed through the terrifying landscape of 16th century epidemics, where fear and desperation often drove people into the arms of quacks and their dubious panaceas. But now, as you drift further into the historical mist, let's explore a quieter yet profoundly significant undercurrent, the subtle beginnings of doubt, the nascent whispers of skepticism that would, in time, begin to chip away at the monolithic edifice of ancient medical beliefs. Not everyone, even in this era of profound uncertainty, was entirely convinced by the endless purges, the bloodletting, or the flamboyant promises of snake oil. So, as you drift deeper into sleep, reflect on the sheer courage, or perhaps desperation, of those living in the 16th century. Every time they felt unwell, they faced a medical system rooted in a flawed, yet deeply entrenched, theory. They endured gruesome bloodletting, violent purges, and painful blistering, all in the unwavering belief that they were restoring balance to their humors. It was a time when the path to health was often paved with pain and discomfort, and where the line between cure and catastrophe was perilously thin. You are fortunate to live in an age where a simple pill can often do what a gallon of bloodletting once promised. Imagine yourself among the more observant individuals in your 16th century town. You've seen countless neighbors subjected to the same treatments. The opening of a vein, the foul-tasting emetic, the application of a blistering plaster, yet the fevers persist, the coughs worsen, and the plague continues its relentless march. You've heard the grand pronouncements of the university-trained physician, his Latin phrases echoing with authority, and the booming sales pitch of the itinerant quack, his promises as bright as his stage lights. But deep down, a quiet voice of reason begins to stir. You start to notice that the outcomes don't always match the theories. It's like watching someone try to fix a leaking bucket by painting it a different color. Eventually, you're going to wonder if there's a better way. You've just endured the rather brutal, if well-intentioned, purges of the 16th century, from the flowing bowls of bloodletting to the violent expulsions induced by emetics and laxatives. Now, as you recover, perhaps a little weaker, but theoretically more balanced, let's turn our attention to the gentler, yet equally complex, Side of 16th century medicine, the world of herbal brews and potent poultices. This is where the wisdom of generations, the keen observation of nature, and a healthy dose of hopeful experimentation truly come into play. This nascent skepticism wasn't a sudden, widespread revolution. It was a slow, creeping realization, often born from repeated failure and empirical observation, however informal. While humoral theory dominated, there were always practitioners, often those working on the fringes or with a more practical bent, who began to question its absolute infallibility. They saw that bloodletting, while theoretically sound within the humoral framework, often left patients weaker and more susceptible. They noticed that some herbal remedies worked, while others, despite their supposed humoral properties, did nothing. This wasn't a rejection of all ancient wisdom, but rather a quiet, persistent questioning of its practical application. Imagine stepping into an apothecary's shop, a place that smells of dried herbs, exotic spices, and something vaguely earthy. Unlike the stark, often bloodied environment of the barber surgeon, this space feels more like a sanctuary, a repository of natural wonders. Jars line the shelves, filled with dried leaves, roots, flowers, and barks, each labeled with a cryptic Latin name. The apothecary, often a figure of quiet authority, meticulously grinds, mixes, and measures, transforming nature's bounty into remedies for every conceivable ailment. This is where you might find a glimmer of hope that doesn't involve losing a pint of blood. One common historical fact that illustrates this early discontent is the growing importance of direct anatomical observation. While dissections were still relatively rare and often performed under strict conditions, figures like Andreas Vesalius, though slightly earlier than the core 16th century, his influence permeated it began to publish detailed anatomical atlases based on actual human dissection. Rather than relying solely on the ancient texts of Galen, you might not be a physician, but even you might hear whispers of these new, detailed drawings, showing the body as it actually was, not just as ancient philosophers thought it was. This direct observation, however limited, began to highlight discrepancies between Galen's descriptions often based on animal dissections and human anatomy, sowing the seeds of doubt about the absolute authority of ancient wisdom. It's like being told the world is flat, then seeing a ship disappear over the horizon. The use of plants for medicinal purposes is, of course, as old as humanity itself. In the 16th century, this knowledge was deeply ingrained in society, passed down through families, codified in herbals, illustrated books detailing plants and their uses, and studied by physicians. Every plant, from the common daisy to the rare mandrake, was believed to possess specific properties that could influence the humors, soothe pain, or expel disease. It's a vast, intricate pharmacopoeia, built on centuries of trial and error, observation, and, inevitably, a fair bit of wishful thinking. This budding skepticism also manifested in the critiques of quackery. While many were fooled, there were always voices of dissent, often from established physicians who saw their profession undermined by the charlatans, or from satirists who mocked their outlandish claims. Pamphlets and broadsides, early forms of public discourse, sometimes exposed the fraudulent nature of these miracle cures, warning the public against their deceptions. It was a slow battle, certainly, but the seeds of public awareness were being sown. You might hear a learned gentleman grumbling in the tavern about the latest elixir being nothing but colored water and cheap brandy. Honestly, if it cured everything, why aren't they immortal? He might scoff, taking a long swig of his ale. Let's say you're suffering from a persistent cough, perhaps a lingering cold that the bloodletting didn't quite banish. Instead of more purging, the apothecary might prescribe a soothing herbal brew. You might be given a mixture containing marshmallow root, known for its mucilaginous properties that could coat and soothe an irritated throat. Or perhaps horehound, a bitter herb traditionally used for coughs. You would boil these dried herbs in water, steep them, and drink the resulting liquid, hoping its warmth and inherent properties would calm your inflamed airways. It's a bit like your grandmother's chicken soup, but with a lot more historical gravitas and a distinct lack of noodles. An obscure detail that points to this early questioning is the development of more systematic case studies. Even if rudimentary, some physicians, perhaps frustrated by the limitations of humoral theory, began to keep more detailed records of their patients' symptoms, treatments, and outcomes. While not scientific trials in the modern sense, these observations accumulated over time would have provided a practical, empirical counterpoint to purely theoretical diagnoses. They might notice that a certain treatment consistently failed for a particular set of symptoms, regardless of the patient's supposed humoral imbalance. This slow accumulation of practical data, however imperfect, was the very first step towards evidence-based medicine. It's like trying to figure out why your bread isn't rising by meticulously writing down every ingredient and step, rather than just blaming the moon. For external ailments, poultices were the go-to remedy. Imagine a painful swelling, a deep bruise, or a festering wound. The apothecary might prepare a poultice by crushing various herbs, perhaps plantain leaves, known for their drawing properties, or comfrey, believed to aid in bone healing, and mixing them with a liquid, like water, wine, or even urine, to form a thick paste. This paste would then be spread onto a cloth and applied directly to the affected area. The warmth and moisture of the poultice, combined with the supposed medicinal properties of the herbs, were believed to draw out infection, reduce swelling, or promote healing. It's a truly hands-on approach, often leaving you smelling faintly of damp earth and crushed botanicals. The academic debate surrounding this period of early skepticism often focuses on its true impact. Historians still debate whether these nascent doubts were truly revolutionary, laying the groundwork for the scientific revolution in medicine, or if they were merely isolated instances of questioning that had little immediate effect on mainstream medical practice, which remained largely entrenched in humoral theory for centuries. Was it a flickering candle in the darkness, or the first faint glow of dawn? It's a fascinating question. How much did these early doubts truly accelerate the shift towards modern medicine? And how much was simply inevitable? One common historical fact that often surprises people is the widespread use of opium, derived from the poppy plant, as a painkiller and sedative. While its addictive properties were not fully understood, its effectiveness in dulling pain and inducing sleep was well known. Physicians and apothecaries would prescribe laudanum, an alcoholic tincture of opium, for a variety of ailments, from severe pain to insomnia. It was a powerful tool in their limited arsenal, offering genuine relief in an era devoid of modern analgesics. So, if you had a toothache that made you want to scream, a few drops of laudanum might have been your best, and only friend. You might also notice the emergence of more specialized practitioners, moving away from the cure-all approach. While the quack promised a single remedy for everything, some more astute individuals began to focus on specific ailments or body parts. You might find a practitioner who specialized in eye complaints, or another who was particularly skilled at setting bones. This specialization, however limited, suggested a growing recognition that the human body and its ailments were too complex for a single, universal solution. It's like realizing that one wrench can't fix every single problem in your house. Beyond the more common herbs, the 16th century also saw the use of more exotic and sometimes dangerous plant materials. Mandrake root, with its human-like shape, was steeped in folklore and believed to possess powerful magical and medicinal properties, often used as an anesthetic or a purgative. Despite its toxicity, belladonna, or deadly nightshade, was another potent plant, used cautiously for its pain-relieving and antispasmodic effects, but easily fatal in the wrong dosage. The line between medicine and poison was incredibly fine, and the apothecary's skill lay in knowing precisely where that line lay. It's like playing a game of botanical roulette, hoping you pick the right berry. The very failures of the traditional system, particularly during devastating epidemics like the plague, also fueled this discontent. When the most learned physicians, armed with their ancient wisdom, could offer no effective defense against a rampant killer, it inevitably led to a loss of faith in their methods. The desperation for any solution, as we discussed, also meant that people were willing to experiment, to try new things, even if those new things were simply the quack's latest concoction. This openness to alternatives, born of necessity, inadvertently created a space for new ideas, however slowly, to emerge. When the plague is ravaging your community, the university-trained physicians, with their humoral theories and bloodletting, often prove utterly ineffective. They might prescribe complex herbal concoctions, or advise you to carry sweet-smelling herbs to ward off the bad air. But the death toll continues to mount. Their learned pronouncements offer little comfort against the relentless advance of the disease. This impotence of established medicine creates an even larger vacuum, a desperate void that the quacks and their panaceas eagerly rush to fill. Consider the role of printing. The 16th century saw the proliferation of printed books and pamphlets. While many of these spread misinformation from quacks, they also allowed for the wider dissemination of new ideas, anatomical drawings, and critiques of established practices. A physician in one city could read about the observations of a colleague in another, fostering a nascent intellectual exchange that was impossible in earlier centuries. This shared knowledge, however fragmented, was crucial for the eventual development of a more unified scientific approach to medicine. It's like the early internet, but with more woodcuts and fewer cat videos. An obscure detail that highlights the blend of practical knowledge and superstition in herbal medicine is the concept of the doctrine of signatures. This belief held that plants resembled the body parts or diseases they were intended to treat. For example, lungwort, with its spotted leaves resembling diseased lungs, was used to treat respiratory ailments. Liverwort, with its lobed leaves resembling the liver, was prescribed for liver complaints. Walnuts, with their brain-like appearance, were thought to be good for the head. While scientifically unfounded, this doctrine provided a memorable, if misleading, mnemonic for identifying potential remedies. It's a charming, if ultimately incorrect, way to organize your botanical pharmacy. The subtle shift in perspective also involved a greater emphasis on observation over pure theory. While humoral theory remained dominant, some practitioners began to pay closer attention to the actual symptoms of the patient, the course of the disease, and the effects of their interventions, rather than simply trying to fit everything into a pre-existing theoretical box. This wasn't a full embrace of the scientific method, but it was a step in that direction, a recognition that the body itself held clues that could guide treatment. It's like realizing that sometimes you just have to listen to what your car is telling you, rather than just reading the manual. The academic debate surrounding the efficacy of 16th century herbal medicine is a rich one. Historians and ethnobotanists still debate whether the perceived effectiveness of many herbal remedies was due to genuine pharmacological activity, the powerful placebo effect, or simply the body's natural healing processes. While some plants, like willow bark containing salicin, a precursor to aspirin or foxglove source of digitalis for heart conditions, genuinely contained active compounds, many others were likely inert or even harmful. Was the occasional success enough to perpetuate the entire system? Or was it a testament to the human need for hope in the face of suffering? It's a question that requires a deep dive into both historical records and modern pharmacology. You might even encounter individuals who, through sheer practical experience, developed effective remedies or techniques that defied humoral explanation. A midwife, through generations of practical knowledge, might know a specific herb that eased childbirth, even if she couldn't explain its humoral properties. A bone setter might have a knack for realigning fractures that seemed almost miraculous. These practical successes, often achieved outside the formal medical establishment, provided empirical evidence that sometimes things just worked, regardless of the prevailing theory. The preparation of these remedies was an art form. The apothecary wasn't just a dispenser, they were a chemist, a botanist, and often a physician in their own right. They knew the precise time to harvest herbs, how to dry them to preserve their potency, and the correct methods for extraction, whether through decoctions boiling, infusions steeping, or tinctures dissolving in alcohol. The quality of the remedy depended heavily on their expertise and the freshness of their ingredients. You weren't just getting a pill, you were getting a handcrafted potion. The seeds of skepticism were also sown by the increasing awareness of different medical traditions. As exploration and trade expanded, Europeans encountered medical practices from other cultures, particularly from the Middle East and Asia, which sometimes offered alternative explanations and remedies. While often viewed through a European lens, this exposure to different approaches, however limited, could subtly challenge the absolute dominance of Western humoral theory. It's like realizing there's more than one way to make a cup of tea. Beyond the formal apothecary, you also had the village wise women and cunning folk. These practitioners, often operating outside the established medical hierarchy, have possessed a wealth of local knowledge about plants and their uses. They might not speak Latin or understand humoral theory in its academic sense, but they knew which herbs grew in the local woods, which ones could ease a child's fever, or which could help with a difficult childbirth. Their remedies were often simpler, passed down orally, and deeply rooted in community tradition. They were the accessible healers, often the first port of call for the common person. So, as you finally drift into the deepest parts of your sleep, reflect on the quiet, persistent voices of doubt that began to emerge in the 16th century. In a world dominated by ancient theories and desperate remedies, a few observant individuals began to question, to record, and to look for answers beyond the established dogma. It was a slow, arduous process, fraught with challenges. But these early whispers of skepticism were the first crucial steps on the long, winding path towards the scientific understanding of medicine that you enjoy today. You are now entering an era where the answers might not be immediate, but the questions are finally beginning to change. The concept of dosage was, by modern standards, rather imprecise. While apothecaries did use weights and measures, the exact concentration of active compounds in natural remedies varied wildly depending on the plant, the growing conditions, and the preparation method. This meant that the same dose of an herbal brew could have vastly different effects from one batch to another, leading to unpredictable outcomes. It's like baking a cake without knowing the exact measurements of flour or sugar. Sometimes it's perfect. Sometimes it's a disaster. You've just glimpsed the faint flickers of skepticism that began to challenge the rigid medical beliefs of the 16th century. Those quiet doubts that hinted at a different path forward. Now, as you drift into the final moments of our historical journey, let's witness the slow, often agonizing, dawn of reason, the gradual, yet profound, shift away from ancient dogma towards empirical observation, and the very beginnings of what we now recognize as modern medicine. This wasn't a sudden burst of light, but rather a prolonged, twilight struggle against centuries of entrenched belief. Even the application of heat and cold was considered a form of herbal treatment. Warm poultices were used to draw out cold humors or to soothe inflammation, while cooling compresses, often soaked in herbal infusions, were applied to fevers or hot swellings. The temperature itself was seen as a therapeutic agent, working in conjunction with the plant's properties to restore humoral balance. It's a testament to their holistic approach, where every element of the treatment, from the herb to its temperature, was considered vital. Imagine yourself standing at the precipice of a new era. The grand, comforting, yet ultimately flawed edifice of humoral theory is still largely intact, but cracks are beginning to appear. The repeated failures of bloodletting, the ineffectiveness of purges against devastating epidemics like the plague, and the undeniable charlatanism of the snake oil peddlers have, collectively, eroded some of the unwavering faith in traditional methods. You've seen enough to know that something isn't quite right, that the answers aren't as simple as balancing four fluids. It's like trying to navigate a ship with a map that keeps leading you to dry land. Eventually, you're going to question the map. The psychological comfort offered by these remedies cannot be overstated. In a world where illness was often terrifying and inexplicable, the act of taking a potion, applying a poultice, or drinking a soothing tea offered a sense of agency and hope. Even if the physiological effects were minimal, the ritual itself could be profoundly reassuring, providing a mental balm in a time of physical distress. Sometimes the belief in the cure is just as powerful as the cure itself. The shift wasn't driven by a single genius, but by a collection of curious minds, often working independently, who dared to look at the human body and its ailments with fresh eyes. These were individuals who valued what they saw and observed over what ancient texts said. They began to conduct more dissections, not just to confirm Galen, but to truly understand the intricate machinery of the human form. You might hear hushed conversations in university towns about new anatomical discoveries, about nerves and vessels that didn't quite match the old descriptions. This direct observation was revolutionary, forcing a confrontation between dogma and reality. So, as you continue your journey into slumber, remember the quiet power of the plant world in the 16th century. From the soothing warmth of a chamomile tea to the potent, sometimes dangerous, effects of opium. Herbs were the backbone of everyday medicine. They offered a gentler alternative to the bloodletting and purges, a more natural path to healing, albeit one still steeped in the humoral theories of the time. It was a world where your local garden could be your pharmacy, and the apothecary, a master of botanical secrets, held the keys to both comfort and, occasionally, profound danger. One common historical fact that marks this slow dawn is the work of figures like William Harvey. Though his groundbreaking work on the circulation of blood came slightly after the 16th century, the intellectual groundwork for his discoveries was laid during this period of questioning. The increasing focus on direct anatomical study, the meticulous dissection of human cadavers, and the detailed mapping of the body's internal structures began to challenge the static, humor-based understanding of physiology. The body was no longer just a vessel for humors. It was a complex, dynamic system, and understanding its mechanics became paramount. It's like realizing your house isn't just a collection of rooms, but a complex system of plumbing and wiring. You've explored the intricate dance of humors and the earthy remedies of apothecaries, a world where healing was a blend of ancient theory and botanical wisdom. But now, as you settle deeper into your slumber, let's pull back the curtain on a more colorful, and often more dangerous, aspect of 16th century medicine, the rise of the quacks. In an era where genuine medical understanding was limited and regulation was virtually non-existent, the stage was perfectly set for charlatans, mountebanks, and self-proclaimed miracle workers to flourish, preying on the desperation and credulity of a populace yearning for relief. The development of new tools, however rudimentary, also played a crucial role. The invention of the microscope, though still in its infancy in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, offered the tantalizing possibility of seeing what was previously invisible. Imagine the awe, and perhaps terror, of seeing tiny, wriggling creatures in a drop of water, or the intricate structure of a flea. While germ theory was still centuries away, these early glimpses into the microscopic world hinted at a level of complexity far beyond the four humors. It's like finally getting glasses after a lifetime of blurry vision. Imagine yourself in a bustling town square, the air alive with the shouts of merchants, the braying of donkeys, and the excited chatter of a crowd gathering around a makeshift stage. On this stage stands a flamboyant figure, perhaps dressed in an outlandish costume, with a booming voice and a captivating smile. This is the quack, the itinerant doctor who travels from village to village, promising cures for every ailment under the sun. He's not a university-trained physician, nor a quiet apothecary. He's a showman, a salesman, and a master of persuasion. And he's about to captivate your attention with promises of health and vitality. This era also saw a growing emphasis on chemical remedies, often championed by figures like Paracelsus, who, though controversial, challenged the humoral paradigm by advocating for the use of specific chemical compounds to treat specific diseases. While his methods were often crude and his theories still steeped in alchemy, his focus on chemical interventions, rather than just herbal or humoral ones, represented a significant departure. You might hear of new, potent mineral-based medicines, sometimes effective, sometimes dangerously toxic, but always a sign of a new approach. It's like moving from using only natural ingredients in your cooking to experimenting with synthesized flavors. Some work, some really don't. He might begin his performance with a dramatic flourish, perhaps pulling out a gleaming, oddly shaped instrument, or displaying a jar filled with a brightly colored liquid, shimmering under the sunlight. His patter is smooth, filled with grand pronouncements about his secret knowledge, his travels to distant lands where he acquired ancient remedies, or even divine inspiration. He speaks directly to your fears, your aches, your lingering worries, offering simple, immediate solutions to complex problems. Are you plagued by the ague? Does your stomach churn with discomfort? Do your joints ache with every step? Fear not. For I, the great doctor, insert a suitably grandiose, self-proclaimed title here, have the very elixir that will banish your suffering. It's a bit like a modern infomercial, but with more theatricality and a distinct lack of a money-back guarantee. An obscure detail that highlights this shift is the increasing use of quantitative methods, however basic, in medical observation. Some forward-thinking practitioners began to record pulse rates. Body temperatures, though accurate thermometers, were still far off, and the frequency of certain symptoms with more precision. This wasn't sophisticated data analysis, but it was a move towards measuring and quantifying, rather than just describing. This rudimentary data collection, however imperfect, was a crucial step towards a more empirical, evidence-based approach to medicine. It's like trying to track your daily steps with a sundial. It's not perfect, but it's a start. The lack of formal medical licensing and oversight in the 16th century was a gaping hole that these quacks eagerly exploited. Anyone could set up a stall, declare themselves a healer, and start selling their wares. There were no professional bodies to verify their claims, no legal repercussions for failed treatments, and no public health campaigns to warn against their dangers. Your only protection was your own discernment, which, in a time of widespread illiteracy and limited scientific knowledge, was often a very thin shield indeed. The academic debate surrounding the transition from humoral theory to more modern medical understanding often focuses on the pace of change. Historians still debate whether the scientific revolution in medicine was a gradual evolution, slowly building on earlier observations, or a series of revolutionary breakthroughs that fundamentally shattered old paradigms. Was it a continuous progression, or a series of sudden leaps forward? It's a fascinating question, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when the old ways truly began to crumble. These charlatans often specialized in universal panaceas, single remedies that claimed to cure everything from toothaches to consumption, from melancholy to the plague. They understood the power of a simple, all-encompassing solution in a world where disease was complex and terrifying. Why bother with complicated humoral diagnoses and multiple remedies when one magical elixir could fix it all? This is where the infamous snake oil truly begins to slither into the narrative, a potent symbol of these all-encompassing, yet ultimately fraudulent, cures. The growth of universities and the establishment of medical faculties also played a vital role. While initially steeped in ancient texts, these institutions gradually became centers for new ideas and anatomical study. Students were exposed to direct observation and, slowly, to critical thinking. The intellectual exchange between scholars, facilitated by the printing press, allowed new ideas to spread more rapidly, challenging the isolated pockets of traditional knowledge. You might imagine a young, eager student sketching furiously during a dissection, his mind buzzing with questions that Galen never answered. One common historical fact is that many quacks would employ elaborate tricks and theatrical displays to impress their audience. They might have an accomplice feign a dramatic recovery after taking their elixir, or perform seemingly impossible feats of strength or agility, attributing their vigor to their own miraculous concoctions. They understood that seeing was believing, and a good show could sell far more bottles than a dry, academic explanation. It's the original reality TV, but with your health on the line? The failures of the old system, particularly during recurring epidemics, continued to be a powerful catalyst for change. Each outbreak of plague, smallpox, or typhus, which traditional methods proved incapable of stopping, reinforced the urgent need for new understanding. The desperation that once drove people to quacks now, for some, it began to drive a more rigorous, scientific inquiry. If the old ways didn't work, then new ways had to be found. It's like realizing your leaky boat isn't going to make it across the ocean, and you desperately need to build a better one. The ingredients in these miracle cures varied wildly, but often included common, cheap substances, sometimes mixed with alcohol to give them a kick, or colored brightly to appear more potent. They might contain mild purgatives, sedatives, or stimulants, which could provide temporary relief of symptoms, further cementing the illusion of effectiveness. A laxative might make you feel cleansed. An alcoholic tincture might dull your pain, and a stimulant might give you a fleeting burst of energy. These fleeting effects were enough to convince desperate individuals that the remedy was working, even if the underlying condition remained untreated. You also see the beginnings of public health initiatives, however rudimentary. While the understanding of disease transmission was still limited, the observation that crowded, unsanitary conditions led to more illness prompted some towns to implement basic sanitation measures, like waste removal or attempts to control water sources. These were practical responses to observed problems, even without a full scientific explanation. It's like cleaning your room because it smells bad, even if you don't know why it smells bad. An obscure detail about these quacks is their often ingenious use of marketing. Beyond their theatrical performances, they would sometimes distribute handbills or broadsides, early forms of advertising, proclaiming the wonders of their products. These often featured exaggerated testimonials, fantastical illustrations, and grand claims, designed to catch the eye and instill hope. They were masters of early modern propaganda, understanding that a compelling narrative could be just as powerful as any genuine medicine. It's like getting a spam email, but delivered by a guy in a feathered hat. The slow acceptance of experimentation, even if informal, was another key factor. Instead of simply following prescribed remedies from ancient texts, some practitioners began to experiment, to try different approaches, and to observe the outcomes. This wasn't always systematic, and often involved trial and error, but it was a crucial step towards a more empirical approach. You might hear of a physician trying a new combination of herbs or a different surgical technique, and carefully noting the results, however mixed. It's like a chef experimenting with new ingredients, slowly perfecting a recipe through repeated attempts. The academic debate surrounding the quacks of the 16th century often focuses on their social role. Historians still debate whether they were simply cynical opportunists, or if some genuinely believed in the efficacy of their remedies, perhaps having experienced anecdotal successes. Were they a necessary evil in a time of limited medical access, providing some form of care, however misguided, to those who couldn't afford a university-trained physician? Or were they purely exploitative, profiting from human suffering and delaying access to potentially more effective, though still imperfect treatments? It's a complex question, blurring the lines between fraud and folk medicine. The increasing professionalization of medicine, though still a long way off, also contributed to this shift. As medical knowledge became more complex, and the need for specialized training grew, the distinction between a formally trained physician and a lay healer or quack became more pronounced. While quacks continued to thrive, the groundwork was being laid for a more regulated, scientifically grounded medical profession. It's like the Wild West slowly giving way to established law and order. The quack's appeal was often rooted in their accessibility and affordability. While a formal physician might charge hefty fees and speak in impenetrable Latin, the quack offered a seemingly simple, cheap solution, delivered with charisma and confidence. For the common person, struggling with illness and limited resources, the quack's promises were a beacon of hope in a dark world. They spoke your language, understood your immediate pain, and offered a quick fix, even if it was just smoke and mirrors. So, as you finally drift into the deepest, most peaceful parts of your sleep, reflect on this incredible transition. You've journeyed from a world where snake oil was a desperate hope, where humors dictated your health, and where pain was an unavoidable companion. You've witnessed the slow, arduous, but ultimately triumphant dawn of reason. The 16th century, for all its medical darkness, was also the crucible in which the first sparks of scientific inquiry were ignited, paving the way for the sophisticated medical understanding that you benefit from today. The questions began to change, and with them, so did the very nature of healing. Consider the psychological impact of these figures. When you're suffering, truly suffering, and the established medical system offers painful, often ineffective treatments, the charismatic quack with his dazzling promises can be incredibly alluring. He offers not just a cure, but hope, a sense of control, and a narrative that makes sense in a world full of inexplicable ailments. The placebo effect, the powerful influence of belief on physical symptoms, was undoubtedly a major factor in the perceived success of many of these remedies. If you truly believe something will make you better, sometimes for a short while, it can